The overriding issue here is about the ease of access to medication that people can get. I come from a country in Europe, I'm sorry to make a point about this,
Your accent
where we have
gives it away.
We have a national health service. You can't order drugs in this way. You can't ring a doctor and say, can you give me a prescription? It doesn't work like that. You can't be a celebrity and pay huge sums of money in that way to acquire the kind of medications. We're talking about a doctor who received gallons of propofol, and these were sent to his girlfriend's apartment. They didn't even go to his doctor's office. I mean, come on.
And elaborate on that, Jamie, because really probably the biggest issue here is the ease with which powerful individuals can acquire illicit materials, whether it's...
Actually, I've got to say something, Dylan, referencing your book, it's not ease, it's greed. Because these people can make vast amounts of money if they pay individuals. If you pay
the doctors, you're saying,
the individuals who demand these kind of medications. You can persuade a doctor. Look at this doctor. He was on $150,000 a month
of compensation from Michael. But you're saying because Michael Jackson's business is so profitable that he could uniquely offer a physician 150 G's a month to do whatever he wants.
During the proceedings, wasn't there a question about the suitability of Dr. Murray? Yeah. And AEG, the concert promoter, was told that Mr. Jackson had a rapport with Conrad Murray. I tell you what the rapport was. It was $150,000 a month.
Well, and the rapport was also that Conrad Murray would say yes. And the question is, and we were talking about this.
For $150,000 a month.
Teray and I were talking about this before we came on live. Would you be able to find a doctor who would say yes? And Conrad Murray certainly should have said no. Now, there's a question of whether that's criminal culpability or whether we should be in civil court.
But again,
and we'll find out in a moment.
But
the larger issue, the legacy of Michael Jackson, because we can get mired in the details of this case, but the larger question is, why is there always a doctor who says yes? If you didn't have Conrad Murray, it seems you'd have some other doctor, and Conrad Murray was not the only doctor involved in Michael Jackson's life. Clearly, there have been many for many years
who have been Michael Jackson the only musician who has requested assistance in the medical profession,
look at all
actors, athletes, or all down the list.
I mean, to what you're saying, the $150,000, there is the amount of celebrity and power that Michael Jackson has to when he leans on you and says, this is what I want, and you say yes. How often do we go into the hospital and say to the doctor, I can't sleep, I'm in pain, I need this, I need that, and the doctor says, no, you don't need that. Because the doctor's in the hospital, this is my area,
it's his power
I know
zone.
Better than you. Yes, doctors are extremely powerful, right? And they often play God for better or worse, and they will say, no, you don't need that.
But Martin's whole point is that you can't do that only in America when you have with a private system that we have
which goes to the culpability of AEG in all of this. They were the concert promotion corporation that set up this whole gig. They were all shipping out to London right after Michael Jackson died.
Where does Conrad Murray say, we should say no here for the better health of him for the long term?
Go ahead.
Bless you, Jamie, but money's the name of the game in the U.S. You can't single out a concert promoter. You could point your fingers at the NBA or the owners.
Why not?
Because they're just in it for the profit, and they're not responsible for everybody they're bringing to the table and earning it. Their conduct beforehand.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry to be referential to you, Dylan, but you say in your book, Greedy Bastards, repeatedly that the effect of the incentive culture leads people to do criminal things, and they did it on Wall Street, and they brought the economy down. It is the power of that finance, and we know because the human disposition is so disposed to do such a thing, you have to have safeguards. And this doctor had very few.
But then, Martin, it gets to the question that Dylan was asking us before we came on live. Is Conrad Murray therefore being scapegoated here for decisions made by AEG and others?
Teray said, Conrad Murray could argue that he's operating within a system. As John Kelly says, he broke no laws, and there was the huge presence of this superstar, this star, international.
But isn't this at the end of the day, Teray, yet another indication of the dehumanization of people into product? That effectively, that Michael Jackson ceased to be a human being
a long time ago,
decades ago. And that Michael Jackson, much as we do with pro athletes, you see with all sorts of different types of humans, that are human beings, actual humans, that get turned into an economic commodity where the actual health and well-being of the human being is at the bottom of the list, other than can he/she perform?
Well, there's absolutely that, and that in this way that Michael Jackson being looked at by all these people as a sort of racehorse, and let's make sure the horse can
He's
go
not
as
a person.
fast as it can.
Yes.
To do 50 dates in London, that's what we were gearing up for. That is a superhuman amount of dates. But then it's also on the other side of the coin the deification of a celebrity, in that
the deference to the godliness of the power or the aura.
Yes, the godliness, the power of the aura, and also you are superhuman. You've been superhuman since you were a little kid, so you can deal with anything. So we don't give you a normal sedative to go to sleep. We give you propofol.
Because you're Superman.
Yes, which we don't give at home. I mean, we need a doctor on this panel. How often do we give people propofol?
Well, Martin just did the interview, and it was absurd. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't. I think you're overreaching when you blame like the concert promoter. I mean, for every entertainer that makes a bad choice, one makes a good
and again,
choice.
Fair enough.
Athletes, everybody,
the point is that
good ones and their bad ones.
Of being willing to, which goes to your point when you first started speaking in this conversation, Martin, which is that only in a culture that that doesn't have the safeguards to prevent the abuse of power, can you prevent the abuse of power. That this type of abuse of power will happen as long as it's possible to abuse it.
It's an interesting phenomenon. Michael Jackson conceived 3 children. His last child, Blanket, was conceived with a woman that I don't know who she is, and we don't know any of the details of that conception. Just let me get to the point I'm going to make.
Okay.
Here's the difference.
Of fact, but we'll just assume the conception of the 3 children.
Okay, but here's the point I was going to make. In the UK, there's something called the Human Embryology and Fertilization Authority. You cannot conceive a child outside of the authority and control of that body.
Okay.
It is illegal. In this country, you can conceive a child anywhere you like. You can get someone's semen, an egg, stick it in a clinic somewhere.
So your point is that medical regulation you're saying, what are you saying, Jamie?
I don't understand the point.
The point I'm making is that it is almost like a zoo. The medical regulations in this country don't seem to apply, from conception to controlling pain in the bedroom.
And then you're saying that because there is no basic control much as in the system, those with power and money can distort it to whatever they want.
That Conrad Murray would answer to nobody except a jury if he ends up getting charged.
Precisely. And to your point about money and the commodification of personal relationships, which you talk about in your book, here's what happens. If there is no authority, there's no higher authority that you're answerable to, then guess what you answer to? That's what you answer to.
Yep, what?
Well, yes, he's answering to money.
Who is Conrad Murray?
Conrad Murray, that I'm getting $150,000 a month. How can I say no to this man? So he loses his power as a doctor.
To tell you, no, I'm not giving you those pills, Torre, or whoever the patient may be.
Jamie, correct me, because I love it when you do so.
No, I didn't want to correct you.
No,
I was just curious about the initial statement you made about Michael Jackson conceiving.
I was merely making the point that, and disregard that it was Jackson, I was merely making the point that even in conceiving human life in this country, it is possible to do it without any kind of medical organization overseeing the conception of a life.
So you don't disagree then with John's point that Conrad Murray perhaps should be in this court of law, but that perhaps others should too?
Absolutely, no doubt. And in those proceedings, we heard about other doctors who were prescribing copious amounts of lethal dosages of drugs to that individual.
But is there not a culture of making accessible doctors who will prescribe painkillers and whatever else it may be, that is part of the Dr. Feelgood culture, that is part of the success in music? Not that every band has a Dr. Feelgood, but that this is a cultural phenomenon that's been existing for decades that it's just sort
I don't
of
think
gone
Michael
out of control.
Jackson was feeling so good.
The other thing is, Dylan, I think you're absolutely right, and maybe you don't even know it when you said it, but it's the music industry, it's entertainment. Martin, I don't think it's a U.S. issue and not present in the UK or somewhere else like that. to tweak you a little bit, I think if Michael Jackson was over in the UK, there's the same amount of money involved.
Sure.
He could find a doctor that maybe take one more step,
yes,
but he'd get his propofol. So it's either, you know, sort of when there's the need for it and there's the will and the way, they're going to get it.
Go ahead.
You keep bringing up the Dr. Feelgood analogy, which is a little different because when you take illegal drugs, which a lot of bands do,
and a lot of Americans do, by the way, pharmaceutical drug abuse is on the rise.
Yeah, but you keep locating it in the music.
Well, no, it's just where it starts, but I'm not looking to keep it there, believe me.
But because
it doesn't stay there.
When you take illegal drugs, you know what you're doing. You know you're taking that walk on the wild side. You're doing that for a particular reason. When you bring a doctor into your home to give you a legal drug so that you can go to sleep, I think you expect that he's going to take care of you to where it's not going to go
Here's
too far.
where that falls down. Here's where that argument falls down for me, which is that there are a litany of sleeping medications that are available if you need to sleep. Propofol, by all accounts, is not one of them.
Oh,
and
well,
so
negligence, absolutely.
I wouldn't. Who knows if it's negligence? If I'm in my home and I bring in a doctor and I say, listen, I need to sleep, and the doctor says, oh, I'm going to give you propofol. That is not a sleeping aid. That is a surgical level anesthetic that will annihilate my consciousness for hours to come. So to suggest that there's some genuine sincerity in the architecture of Michael Jackson's need to sleep, with all due respect, when you've got the propofol, is there any chance, John, that Dr. Murray does not get found guilty in this particular verdict? Again, you're looking at short level. If you look at the deliberation duration, 9 hours of deliberation. The trial itself took 6 weeks. I know that one of the things that people like you and Jamie are able to do certainly better than me is to read between the tea leaves on deliberation time and duration to get an indication of the odds of guiltiness.
Well, sure. I mean, and whether you're one of the parties involved or one of the attorneys involved, you always hope you're on the right side of one of these things, but you always fear you're on the wrong side of a surprise too. And, you know, if you had to ask me, if I was betting, taking odds, it's guilty based on course of the trial, the length of deliberations, and what they've heard. But you can't be, Jamie.
I'm going with not guilty, and I'll tell you why. There's the intervening actor, and the intervening actor here is Michael Jackson. The reasonable doubt is Conrad Murray did a lot of bad things. Conrad Murray was not a good doctor, but this is not a civil trial. Clearly, Michael Jackson was a drug addict, and who knows what he took that Conrad Murray was unaware of. Reasonable doubt, not guilty.
I've been thinking since I saw the close that it was going to be guilty on involuntary manslaughter. Because
and an excellent closing argument.
Excellent closing argument by the prosecution, not by the defense.
That was one of the best prosecution closings I've ever seen.
Absolutely. So then just in terms of quality of lawyering, you would have to say probably guilty. I don't think the jury's going to conclude that Michael Jackson killed himself or wanted to die or was negligent himself. Conrad Murray is negligent, so they're going to. And also the other thing that you can't factor out of the thing, there's a bunch of Michael Jackson fans on that jury. I've heard as high as a number of 6. Can't be
guilty
0.
or not guilty. We can't get out of them yet, have we?
Which way is it? Which way?
But you're right. The defense to involuntary manslaughter, because it doesn't require any intent, is any intervening causal factor, because the prosecution has to prove causation. And any intervening cause, including something done by the victim that we might not know about when Conrad Murray stepped out of the room to call one of his many lady friends or to go to the men's room.
I want to bring another voice into the conversation. Mark Garagos is a trial attorney who defended Michael Jackson during the molestation trial. And Mr. Garagos, we thank you for joining the conversation this afternoon. What perspective do you feel that you have on truly the relationship, the matrix of relationships between the family, the doctor, and obviously Michael Jackson himself?
I don't know what perspective I have on that. I mean, I defended Michael during the early stages of the case. One of my associates is on the defense team, so I have kind of conflicted emotions about this. My suspicion is that at least when they got past Friday afternoon, which is kind of the bewitching hour for juries, that maybe it was going to be a hung. I always thought the best that the defense could hope for in this case was a hung jury. I don't think it bodes well for the defense that there's a verdict early on Monday morning.
Is there any precedent in this that exists? I want to, John, I'll get this to you in just a second. But Mr. Geragos, is there any precedent in this that goes forward in any direction?
Well, I've had cases cutting both ways. I had a case where I defended Susan McDougal, where the jury was out after a long trial, a 12-week trial. They were out for the entire Friday. They came back on Monday morning and they acquitted her. And they said one of the reasons they didn't come back right away is they didn't want people to think that.
And just so you know, you can see the live shot inside the courtroom right now. The jurors have begun to enter the courtroom. Mark Geragos, trial lawyer who defended Michael Jackson during the molestation trial, still with us, as is Teray, Martin Bashir, John Kelly, and Jami Floyd. Mark, your initial thoughts?
Well, I expected that if there was a verdict, it'd be guilty. I thought the best the defense could hope for would be a hung jury. I think the suspense right now, and I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of suspense, is whether or not Judge Pastor remands Conrad Murray into custody immediately or allows him to remain on bail until sentencing. If he remands him, I think you can pretty much expect or bet that he's going to get a 4-year state prison sentence, although there's all kinds of nuances to that given realignment in California.
And specifically, just on the nitty-gritty, a recent California prison realignment bill basically says that he would have to serve this in county jail because of prison overcrowding in California. Is that right?
It's exactly right. As of October 1st, we have a sea change here in California. Realignment means that this will be what's called a county jail felony, and that the most he would do would be 2 years, and it's really up to the sheriff to determine how much of that time he'd do.
Your thoughts,
Yeah, that's exactly right. The situation, I mean, we talk about big issues. The situation in California with overcrowding is a huge, big issue. Supreme Court's even weighed in on that, as Mark points out. And so
if you look
that
at
is the suspense
it's a totally
of this
different
case.
subject, but if you look at the systematic incarceration, particularly of young black men in California for minor drug offenses, the irony, and it's a tragic irony.
We're talking about Conrad
Well, you're
Murray.
talking about the drug overdose of Michael Jackson.
Of Michael Jackson.
You're talking about incarcerating this doctor potentially now
in a
state that now holds, I won't say the record, that has such a political issue, Tori, with incarceration of young black men specifically relative to drug offenses, typically minor drug offenses. And now the sort of the comeuppance of all of this is that Conrad Murray, who will now potentially, may get no prison time here, but may potentially have to, if he does do any time, have to do it in county jail because of prison overcrowding in California. Hold on one second, Mark. Go ahead, Tori.
Okay.
I want to touch on a different aspect of what I just saw, a rather disgusting part of the celebrity courtroom circus that we typically see. These people cheering, what are you cheering? Maybe you feel it was justice, but there are no winners here. Okay, there was nothing to cheer. There's nothing to be happy about. A man is dead. He's not coming back. Another man's life is ruined. Maybe he did that to himself, Conrad Murray, but there's nothing to cheer. There's nothing to be happy about. This is not a victory for Michael Jackson or the memory of Michael Jackson.
But it's such an interesting cultural moment, Martin, in this country, because this is not the first time that we have seen a piece of information like this come out to be responded to with this sort of ebullient emotion as if somebody just won the Super Bowl.
Well, and don't you have to wonder how many of those same people were standing outside the Michael Jackson courthouse in 2005 with the signs wanting Michael Jackson to be convicted?
But there's a bigger issue here, which is not just
if you go to another network that I will not name, some of the very same people who are today at this very moment cheering this conviction, I was on the air with those same people wanting Michael Jackson's conviction.
But there is a bigger issue.
They are very confused out there with their signs and their celebrations on the, as you say, wrongly and wrongheadedly confused about our criminal justice system and what it stands for.
But isn't there a bigger issue than Michael Jackson, which is the culture of reality television that has become all of this, such that people want to form a crowd in Los Angeles to have a party on a Monday afternoon Meanwhile, this show, for instance, was going to be dedicated to Greece, the John Corzine leverage scenarios. But instead, the fact of the matter is that this type of content truly sucks up everything, and in the process, we resolve nothing, whether it's in our banking system or healthcare system or anything else.
Let's be clear that a major trial of notoriety like this is pure blood sport.
Yes.
I mean, just there's
nothing rational about it.
No, and it's either you win or you lose. There are no ties. There's no compromise, and that's it. And people love the sport of it. They love to see Conrad Murray maybe taking away handcuffs. They love death, drugs, murder, mystery.
Hold on one second. Mark Garagos, is this really just then another version of Roman bread and circuses? So that while we don't address anything in this country, we won't even get into the list of horrors, from the poverty rate to the educational system, on and on and on, that instead we seek out this sort of lurid entertainment.
It's kind of woven into our history, I guess, unfortunately. And I couldn't have said it better than Jami did. Some of those same people that you see cheering right now are the same people who are cheering for a guilty verdict up in Santa Maria. It's disgusting.
Tori, go ahead.
Well, there's a culture of revenge that's going on here. We want to see this man go down. We want to see blood spilled for the blood of Michael Jackson. And I mean, like, it's just this sort of angry thing, and nothing is solved.
Why can't we? Why do we do this over and over again?
Isn't the answer why, Martin, that the absence of a mechanism to truly, with compassion among men and women, to resolve our issues, whether it's the issues of drug abuse that were at the root of this, whether it's the issues of celebrity, which are underneath that, or whether it's the issues that we never want to talk about, like the 50-to-1 leverage at John Corzine that has Greece, an economy the size of Dallas, Texas, ready to take down Western finance because it's idiotic, that we simply lack the political courage and the political compassion and resolve and the media courage and the media compassion and resolve to address these issues. And the fact of the matter is, this is the cheapest, most profitable content in America today.
You are hinting at your spiritual inclinations. You're really looking for some kind of reach upwards that points at principle, that points at real, genuine values and ethics. And this trial, I think we can safely say now, having heard a verdict, a unanimous verdict, all 12 members of the jury, stout and true, they all regarded this doctor as utterly criminally negligent, a man who kept to not a single principle that he had as an oath as a doctor. And I ask you, Dylan, if you can't trust your doctor, who can you trust?
There's a meme going around Twitter last week. 1% problems, right? There's no showtime in my Ritz room. In the room at the Ritz. My chauffeur,
champagne problems.
My $150,000 a month doctor didn't take care of me when he was giving me propofol so I could sleep. 1%er problems.
We take a break. The panel stays. We're back after this. The panel is still with us. The one thing that we did not talk about that I know all four of you really observed was the complete and utter lack of emotion from Dr. Murray during the verdict.
He was stony-faced. There wasn't even a blink or a flutter of the eyelashes. He just heard it, and I almost wondered whether he was really listening, because there was absolutely no reaction to what is an horrendous.
There must be a school.
I got to think that he expected it. That he was bracing personally for the worst and expecting this guilty verdict. I think most of us at this table expected to be guilty. I think the world around him sort of maybe said, like, oh, this doesn't look good.
I predicted the acquittal, but yeah.
Well, I wasn't calling you out.
Ever the defense attorney. You call me out, brother. I know what you're doing.
All right, joining. Go ahead.
I just want to say, and I say this as a matter of opinion, lest I get sued, because I know that if it's opinion, I can't be. As a former criminal defense attorney, I know a lot of defendants often take medication before the verdict comes in because they just have to take it. This is a case that was largely about medication.
You mean like a Valium?
Would you prepare your defense?
I'm not saying that the defense attorney recommends it.
No, of course.
I'm just saying they're often
and there's evidence of a rising.
To me.
Right.
Would you?
And there's evidence of a rising addiction rate amongst
listen, we're in pure conjecture here.
I notice John is quiet.
Would you tell a defendant?
I think he's going to make a great point.
Go our way. Be prepared to go away and not go home.
You always say that. You always say that,
Much
even
stronger
if you
than
think the case is going your way, which you never do.
Well, no, you almost always will tell your client, it doesn't look good, brace yourself.
You're going down.
You're going down, and there's no downside because if there's an acquittal, no one's going to remember what you said ahead of time. So you really steel the client for that adverse verdict. So
it's like when they tell me every day we're canceling they're going to cancel your TV show.
No, I think that's
and
true.
then I go on TV and I'm like, my goodness, I still have a TV show. It's fantastic.
You know,
I heard them back there, Dylan.
Seriously though, Dylan, I can't forget LA County Deputy District Attorney David Walgren in his final summing up, as he said, and I'm quoting him, "You don't give propofol in a bedroom." What's unusual is that Michael Jackson lived as long as he did under the care of Conrad Murray.
Dr. Howard Neerman, an expert anesthesiologist at the Case Medical Center in Cleveland. Did you just hear what Martin Bashir was reading?
Yes, I did.
Do you agree with that?
Totally agree. I mean, again, as we've said, it's a very powerful drug, and giving too much could cause people not to breathe. And the very fact that he got away with it for how many days, it is amazing.
2 months.
2 months. If you were to look at the earlier criticism of both power, fame, the private drug industry, if you will, the private medical profession. What is your view on power and money's ability to distort medical practice and a medical ethics, not only in America, but really anywhere in the world?
Well, we're all human. We all have issues, and you know, money does corrupt. And if people have power, they have money. As we've said, these drugs aren't illegal to other doctors. How they use them is again is the question here. And when they use drugs that they're really not familiar with or are trained to use, and they do it because they've been corrupted with money, we have a problem.
And if this country was serious, forget Michael Jackson for a second, if America was serious, the American government, the American health regulators, the American state health regulators, county health regulators, up and down the stack, if America was serious about ending the ability for prescription drugs to exist well in excess of their intended use, whether it's Xanax, Oxycontin, all the abused prescription drugs that exist in America today, if regulators were serious about ending that, how would they show that, and could they do it?
That's, you know, I wish I had the solution to that. I mean, there's no question this goes on every day you know, it's not propofol, but it is painkillers and other medications. And people have drug-seeking behavior. They know they can get it. They know someplace down the line, no matter how many good doctors will say no, somewhere down the line there'll be somebody who says yes if there's enough money involved.
Is there anything the regulators could do, and does it help to see a guilty verdict for somebody like Dr. Murray as a disincentive to other physicians?
Oh, I certainly think it does, and there are things regulators can do. They can get better databases so that instead of going shopping from one pharmacy to another to get more drugs, these things can be tied in. I know there's some thought to doing that now, but it isn't complete. And if they start to get better databases to find out how many people are going to which different medication store pharmacies to get it, or to different doctor shopping, all that stuff has got to stop.
And the database is the way you do that. In other words, the ability for regulators to know what prescriptions are tied to which physician anywhere in the world would seem to be central to that.
Correct.
Go ahead, Martin.
I just wanted to mention to you, Dylan, not to interrupt, that it looks as though Dr. Conrad Murray has been remanded into custody now. He has been cuffed and is in the courtroom even as we speak. We were talking earlier, Jamie, about whether that was likely to happen. Yeah. And you were unsure of that.
Yeah, well, now that he's been convicted, I'm not surprised that he's being remanded. The question that Dylan raised earlier of the 4 years in county jail, not prison, is what remains. And I guess we had a bit of a disagreement with Mark Garagos. Mark seems to think that he'll get the full 4 years. I'm not so sure that he will, given the prison crowding issue. It's fascinating what the doctor says about this question of regulating the prescription drug
industry.
If
our government was serious about making it harder for doctors and patients to exhibit behavior that I would argue that the Conrad Murray, Michael Jackson behavior is one of the more extreme iterations you can conceive of. One of the most wealthy, one of the most famous men in the world, paying $150,000 a month to get this. But to the point, the conversation we were just having with the doctor, there is a culture that is permissive around basically excess prescriptions, which is something that it would seem something could be done about if, in fact, our government was aggressive in trying to deal with that. Am I wrong in that opinion?
It seems that every single month we open the paper, and there is this is not even talking about the ordinary citizen that you don't read about or hear about. There is some celebrity, clearly not of the level of Michael Jackson, because no one is, but someone has died from a prescription drug overdose or the interaction of prescription drugs. They get one drug from one doctor, one drug from the other. They interact. And we all say, oh, isn't it a shame? Can't we do something about this? Why don't we do something about it? What about the pharmaceutical companies? What about the pharmacies? What about the doctor? And then we go on about our business. We forget until the next month when we read about the next death. And that's why I wonder about what the doctor
So, doctor, if I was to say, take advantage of the privilege of my position as a member of the national media to begin to ask more aggressive questions of healthcare regulators, who is it that I would want to talk to, and what would I want to ask them?
I think you need to talk to the legislators of each state because this is mostly a state-run type of issue. And so we need to have better laws to get better databases. We need to have stricter penalties. I mean, we need to know that doctors cannot get away with just pill mills, essentially, where anybody who comes in and has got some money, they'll write a prescription for. We've got to stop doctor shopping. We have to stop pharmacist shopping. And we need to make penalties so that people understand that there's a price to pay.
Just two things, Dylan. We're learning that the court has set a sentencing date for November the 29th, and that an ambulance has arrived because a fan has fainted.
How appropriate.
You were anticipating it.
If you were to look, doctor, at the weakest part of the chain, which is obviously there's a relatively small number of physicians in any given state that are the ones that are the most accessible to this type of behavior. Is there a way that you could simply identify by physician the prescription rate such that I could take the doctors that in the top 5%, let's say, of all prescription issuances and simply start by looking in places like that?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. There's no question that we have the ability, the technological ability to find out how many prescriptions each physician writes, what types of prescription they're writing for. And we don't have to say you're guilty, but we say, let's review your practices. Why are you using so much of OxyContin, and how many different patients do you see a day?
Which they did in the Jackson case. They were able to look at Arnie Klein, again, not called as a witness. Again, he denies it, but they were able to look at the number of scripts he wrote to Michael Jackson for Demerol. His signature was on the scripts. He says, wasn't me, was just my office.
But the point is, if this country was serious about breaking this problem, John, there are things we could be doing that we are not doing.
Right, and I've always said, and for different reasons, that this was a selective prosecution of Dr. Murray, but it serves a very good purpose, just like Barry Bonds and steroids. It cleans up the athletic industry. This makes all these doctors aware of the perils of prescribing drugs to excess.
There's just one problem, John, and that is that the pharmaceutical industry is one of the largest in terms of payments to lawmakers in this country.
And it does
and they are the recipients of vast amount. You know better than I do.
And it does seem this all started with the deregulation of the pharmaceuticals, doesn't it?
Let me put you back to a legal issue. Question for you guys. Conrad Murray did not testify on his own behalf, which generally says to a jury and to the court of public opinion that you are guilty and you can't defend yourself. Is that a fair thing to say? Do you think that's part of this verdict?
I'm going to let John take it. I have very strong things about it, John.
No. I mean, there was the reason in this case that Conrad Murray didn't testify was he had made his 2-hour statement to law enforcement right afterwards, and he couldn't go back on that.
2 days after Michael Jackson's
But I think more importantly, No, juries listen to the instruction. They're well prepped before the trial even starts, that the defendant has the absolute right not to testify, and jurors honor that every day. You never hear a juror come out and saying, if we had heard him testify, the result would have been different. That's sort of a cornerstone, a touchstone of our criminal justice system, and that's one thing jurors abide by.
I got to take a break. Let me take a commercial break. We're back right after this. Dr. Howard Neerman is an expert in anesthesiology at the Case Medical Center. He's still with us from Cleveland, as is Touré, Martin Bashir, John Kelly, and Jami Floyd. You said you got something.
I just wonder if Conrad Murray could have gotten a fair trial anywhere in America. Because from the beginning of this story, he was already the villain in the Michael Jackson death story. And you couldn't have had a jury that wasn't poisoned anywhere in America, especially in California, where he surely had a lot of fans. And I was shocked to hear that there were any Michael Jackson fans in the jury. But then how could you find 12 people in America who were none of them Michael Jackson? That would be impossible to find.
One of my experience, I agree with everything that Touré said this afternoon. I think that one of the things you need to recognize, which is slightly unusual with the case of Michael Jackson, is many of his fans regard him as messianic. They actually don't see him as the wonderful composer, dancer, singer, musical impresario. They don't see him like that. They see him as messianic. And what they feel is that he is touched by God in some way. And if you touch Michael Jackson, even if you ask him a question that they don't like, you are persona non grata for the rest of your life. And that's the position. And that was what Touré was hinting at. The power of Michael Jackson is right there. Conrad Murray was facing that in addition to his own negligence.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The legacy, the story of Michael Jackson builds on that. The child star who becomes a young adult star, who becomes the biggest star in the world.
I don't think there's anybody in the world who wouldn't give credit for Off the Wall as an album and Thriller as being two of the greatest albums ever produced by a modern musical artist.
But that doesn't mean that you have to be dehumanized.
Right. I think all of that is true. But I really, really liked and respected what Dylan had to say earlier about the way we turn human beings into products in our culture. It has to do with the commodification of human beings in a consumerist culture. And Michael Jackson has got to be the best example of that. My father actually went to high school with Joe Jackson. In my house, you can't say anything against Joe Jackson, Michael Jackson, any of the Jackson clan. But I have real questions about what happened to that young man, how he was turned into a product. And I think it teaches some really important lessons to us, not just about Michael Jackson, but about the way we treat athletes in this culture, the way we treat other pop stars, and especially when they own the product themselves. What does that do to the psychology of a person, especially if they start that way as a young person? One other thing, the only other thing I want to say, I know we're tight on time, I don't think you can get a fair trial when the victim is a celebrity, but these celebrity cases aren't representative of our criminal justice system. The system works in most cases. I worry about the presumption of guilt in these kinds of cases, but I do believe our system works in most cases. John.
Strip away the personalities. This verdict is going to be the shot heard around the medical world. Leave it at that.
And to that end, Dr. Neerman, what will that shot be? What will be heard?
Well, I hope what's going to be heard is that you just can't get away with doing stuff like this. You just can't. You can't be bought. You can't do the wrong thing for patients. And we need to tighten up the way that we handle drugs, the way that we give them out to patients, and we need to weed out the doctors who really aren't practicing very good medicine.
Which really is just about a database, and probably 3 to 5% of that database would be worthy of asking a few more questions, and probably less than. 1% of that would actually be wrongdoing, I suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right.
Dr. Neerman, thank you. Touré, thank you so much. Martin, a pleasure. Thank you. John, Jami, thanks to the four of you as well for making my understanding of this, and I think our audience's understanding of this, better than it would have otherwise been, for sure, considering the news of the day. Thank you, guys.